So the agenda is, as you've seen, 30 minutes past the hour, the room's open. This is a short intro to Sydney testers, and then Greg Paskal will do his talk. Now, during the course of the event, if you want to raise any questions, please add them to the chat or at least put your hand up, and then we'll have, as I said, we'll have certain points, maybe a couple of points over the course of the talk where Greg will say he's ready to answer questions. And there'll be a session, you can answer questions at the end as well. Who are Sydney testers? Who are we? We're a group of volunteers with a focus to improve testing for Sydney. We're Sydney's largest testing meetup. And I think there's only a few meetups in Sydney. We're one of them, focused on software testing. We do monthly talks, socials, and other events for the Sydney testing community. We've recently returned to trying to do a live event every month. We didn't do one in February, but we'll be doing more in the future, along with supporting conferences that come here, etc. We've had a wide range of speakers, international and local, in the past, including people like. Sorry, is there anybody who can just put themselves on mute for a second, apart from Greg, who's still obviously speaking? So there's a bit of noise in the background. Sorry, Amberish, I'm just going to put you on mute for a second. I hope you don't mind. Okay, going back to what I was saying. So, including people like Sam Connolly, our former chair, Manoj Kumar, Baz Dijkstra, Trish Koo, Jean-Ann Harrison, Michael Bolton, James Bark, Matt Santon Rutherford, who's also among one of our committee members alongside Manoj Kumar, Michael Payton on the recruitment side, Michael Larson, who did our last talk, Stephanie Russell, who is also Sydney based. So quite a lot of interesting names, both in Sydney and outside of Sydney. So we try and cater for that. If you want to get involved, speak with us in person. We're always looking for people to help out with events, or for people who want to do talks. We have a current CFP going, which I can send you a link to if you're interested. So people who want to do in-person talks, but we will also be doing online talks every few months or so, every 2 or 3 months. Speak with me in person, or send me a message on LinkedIn, or just email me at paulwaltersau@gmail.com. So tonight's speaker is Greg Paskal. Over 30 years of experience in software development and test engineering, passionate, influential leader in the QA and test automation community. He coaches and mentors leaders, teaching them the craft of testing and automation, directing them in best practices and risk assessment. He also innovates in automated test data analysis, identifying critical attributes to understand application personality metrics. He's the creator of METS, the Minimal Essential Testing Strategy, and the author of Test Automation in the Real World. He shares his insights and expertise through public speaking, publications, podcasts, and online platforms. And he's a regular conference speaker, speaking at numerous conferences, including Star West, Star East, Pacific North. Is that Pacific Northeastern Software Quality Conference, is it?
Northwest Software Quality Conference, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it's Northwest. My apologies.
That's a big
one. Yeah. Automation Guild and QA Trailblazers. He's a certified tester, CTFL foundation level by ASTQB, and a Kanban practitioner. And he's an evangelist in testing, automation, METS, as previously stated, author and speaker at craftofTesting.com. And if you want to get in touch with him, you can do it through his LinkedIn. That's his LinkedIn there, just search for Greg Paskal. All right, cool. Is there anything else you want to mention about as an intro to yourself? Or are you happy with that, Greg?
Paul, that's great. Yeah, I think this is exceptional. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So we have future talks as well. A shout out to Jithin, who is doing our next talk on the 7th of March. This is online, on differences between chatbots and conversational AI, then a deep dive into postbot. On the 19th of March, we have in-person. We're not sure on the dates yet because it depends on the venue. We have Hemant Oya. Oh, sorry, I can't pronounce his name. My apologies. And we're still deciding on he's still deciding on the topic he wants to speak at. And then on the 17th of April, or at least during that week, in person, we're going to have a great speaker, maybe one of the best speakers in Sydney on the testing front, Anne-Marie Charette. and she's going to be doing a talk on testing in the age of remote working. That's not the full title yet. When I post the formal invite to the event, I'll put in the full title. But basically, it will be about how we have to communicate better as testers, how we have to work better and integrate better with remote teams, and all the challenges that this causes us. So, great topic. And on that note, let me stop the screen share and restart the local reporting. And please, Greg, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here with you all today. It's early in the morning here in Nashville, not quite 1 a.m. So if I see a little sleepy, I got some rest, but I love speaking with our international community. And so when Paul and I began to speak, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. So it's a real privilege to be with all of you today and to get to share, my area of passion around our testing community, around test engineering, test automation, quality, and risk assessment. I'm really passionate about this space for lots of reasons I'm going to get to share with you today, but I would love to connect with you. So Paul shared my LinkedIn connection. So feel free to reach out and connect because it's one of my favorite things is getting to know you and learning about the work you're doing in quality and the challenges you face and talking over those things. Paul covered obviously a lot of things in my background. One of the other resources I didn't share, but I think it'd be useful would be one of my websites. I have many, but real world, let's see, we have realworldtestautomation.com has about 50 or 60 articles I've written out there over the last probably 20 or 25 years. Some of those articles are in my book as well, which you can find on Amazon and Audible as well. Anyway, it's great to get a chance to talk with you all today and kind of merge into this topic of what does it mean to take the work that we do and really transform it from an everyday job, I would say, that's just boring that you show up and make it something really interesting. The more I spend with quality engineers, and I find that they can get stuck in a rut. I was recently in a conversation with someone who said, "We've reached the max. We've reached the pinnacle when it comes to automation. There's nothing new," and it was heartbreaking to hear that because there is so much potential opportunity. And I would say that's part of kind of my message I like to share with our community is to help them see beyond maybe what they've experienced in the work of QA up to this point, and to help them really dream outside that box because I think there's a potential for a lot of innovation still to happen. So anyway, I do get a chance to do a lot of.
Ah, non, ça me dit la joie.
I do
Sorry,
get a
I've
chance.
muted that.
Okay. Do get a chance to do a lot of speaking international. I'm working with a great group of automation engineers now in Rwanda, Africa. A number of them have just joined us. And so welcome, team. What a privilege to be in this season where it's hard to believe I've actually been working in automation for over 40 years now. Some of you might be thinking, wow, I'm not even 40 years old. How could you work in this field so long? But I was really fortunate to get a great break early in my technical career. And I started to do some work for an aerospace company, writing some of my earliest automation on Apple IIs. If you go way back, this is well before the Mac, and writing code in BASIC and assembly language. This is when monitors were only green, and we worked on printers that used tractor feed paper. So it's really an incredible journey to see how the technology's evolved over this time. And I think that that's given me some insight and to see how things have evolved in the space of technology. And so for some of you, you may be fairly new to the tech space. Maybe you've got less than 10 years under your belt. And from your perspective, you've only known a world that has had the internet, or maybe a world that's had Facebook, or some of these other technologies that are now decades old. But those may be things that you think, well, we've always had those things, but they're amazing technologies that have come into place, and I've got to watch the transition. So you can imagine people that got to see technologies like maybe a car come into place, or computers for the very first time. It gives them a different perspective sometimes to think about where they've come from, where they're at, and where they can go. So let me jump into my talk. I really don't have any slides today, but I do have my outline, and I'm going to go through that. And as Paul mentioned, I want you to kind of consider your questions. We may take a couple breaks through this talk and address them. And of course, I'm available afterwards. And if we don't get it covered here, please reach out on LinkedIn, and we can continue the conversation there. Okay. So, um, have you ever considered that there's no degree in the work of quality assurance? Now you have training programs like the work that Michael Bolton's doing, or the work that some of the stuff I've done through ASTQB or ISTQB. There really isn't any formal education in this work. And so for most of us, we've learned the work of quality assurance through it being passed on from one person to the next. Imagine how it must feel to be a pioneer in something that's brand new. All right. Well, in a way, we kind of getting a chance to do that. When I first started in the work of testing, the term quality assurance wasn't even used. I was basically a test engineer. I was just an engineer, an electrical engineer actually, and this is my work in the aerospace, designing hardware, and also writing software to perform life test of, at that point in time, it was for satellite systems. Basically, these devices we would launch in outer space, and we needed a way of testing how they were doing. The one we launched up in space, we had an equivalent one down on Earth, and we ran metrics on that to determine how it was holding up, floating around in geosynchronous orbit, if you can imagine that. So as a pioneer, what would be the obstacles that we would face, right? And what would be the first things that we would get a chance to discover would be pretty exciting. Now, if you think about it, we're actually all pioneers on that journey, all right? There may have been forms of quality assurance, I don't know, 100 or so years ago. I don't know if they really would have called it that. Some people even debate that we shouldn't even call this craft that we do quality assurance, because can we really assure quality? And I wouldn't get too hung up in that. That is, will we rename it something, or will it have other nuances down the road? Quite possibly. But at the end of the day, the work that we do is important work. I just published an article, and the topic is called Quality Veneer. I hope some of you had a chance to see it. If not, you can easily find it. I published it on LinkedIn, and you can actually just search Quality Veneer and Greg Paskal on Google. It'll probably come up now. I was inspired to write that article because I've recognized that there are many things that pass for the work of quality. All right. And I was actually in this article, I'm going to kind of deviate from where I was originally going to speak on, but I want to tell you a little bit about it. Earlier this year, I was with a friend, and she was putting a new office together, and she needed some help building one of those flat package pieces of furniture you buy in like an office supply store, where you put board A with board B, and there's some sort of dowels, and it might be a kind of piece of furniture we might get at an IKEA or something like that. And so as we were assembling this piece of furniture, I noticed a couple things, and the first was that the finish on the furniture was beautiful. It was like almost a beech wood, and had a great look to it. But just below the surface, I mean, the thickness of a playing card below it was this wood. I think it's often called press board, and it was the kind of material that a carpenter would probably throw out at the end of the day of working. It was just scrap wood somehow glued together. And it was about, this thick. And then here was this beautiful veneer pasted on top of it. And as I'm assembling this piece of furniture, I realize I'm like, this is kind of an illusion of quality. Here we have this beautiful veneer of wood, and just underneath it, we have what many people would consider scraps to be thrown away. And it dawned on me that in my time officially as a QA engineer and as working in testing before that, that actually that is a picture of what can often be presented as the work by our community. And so this paper came out of that. And again, I'd love for you to read it on the topic of quality veneer. But it was a very sad thing also to recognize in that many things are passing for quality these days. The fact is a lot of folks really don't know what we do, but they know they need some kind of testing. So they put a QA team in place. They say, well, go do that, go do that thing you do. And from there, we get a chance to go in and do our best. But what's the bar that we set? Well, how do we even know how to approach this? We might even know some of the words. We might say, well, we're going to write test cases, and we throw out the term regression, and we might even say shift left or some of the other jargon that goes along with our field. And yet the deliverable can look drastically different from one team to the next. And so it just, as I spent the time working through this article and writing and editing and working through it, it was like I had a new set of glasses that were on, and I started seeing the world through this different perspective of, wow, there's a lot of things that we consider to be a quality product, but really aren't that great of quality. And so the heart of that was that in our work, we can deliver something that maybe even our conscious or our gut tells us, it could be better, but the customer may not know better. So anyway, that's my little deviation, but I do want to encourage you to take a read of that article because it's getting a lot of traction and a lot of interest. It's one of the few articles that I think within a week had almost 3,500 reads on it. So it was really exciting to see the community digging in on this. And I think it's a topic we have to bridge as a community because people are concerned about things like AI and all that other stuff coming in. I mean, it's the topic of the day right now, right? Everybody and their grandma's talking about it. If we deliver a product that at the end of the day, someone steps away and says, I'm not really sure that was worth the money I spent, then in a way, we're hurting our whole future as a community. So anyway, enough of that. But I hope you hear the heart of that. And I want to encourage you, the few dozen of you online, or how many people are logged in and listening to this talk, that we all have a responsibility to do a job well. Like the buck kind of stops with us and what we present as good quality work. Okay. Now, kind of going back to that idea of being a pioneer, there's more than one path to the destination of this work of quality engineering. Okay. And there's a great conviction that most of us have that we've each found the best way to do it. All right. We could probably all sit in a round table setting right now, looking at one another, with our bottles of water, and we'd be communicating about what we would consider, a good quality product or what we deem as good quality work. And then there would be the confusion of the languages and terms we'd use. Some people would say, well, it's all about finding bugs, or I think that was a feature, that wasn't a bug. Some might be talking about positive tests, and others might be calling things happy path. Some people would use the term regression, and others smoke test. And so even our language as a testing community is not consistent. This is one of the reasons I really like the training in ISTQB and ASTQB is at least they define a language. Okay, and so if for no other reason that we at least have some common terms to communicate, that is a step in the right direction. So whatever methodologies and approaches that you've used with your team, I do a talk called The 7 Fundamentals of a Successful Test Team. And one of the first things I say is you've got to have a common language, a way that you communicate things across your team. And this is the reason why, because without it, you begin to use a term and you realize it's completely interpreted different. A great example of this is a company I worked for had a different meaning for bug versus defect. It's the first time I've ever encountered that where those two terms didn't mean the same thing, but they had decided a bug meant this and a defect meant that. And it had began to get some cultural roots. And every time we hired another quality engineer, the first thing I began to teach them is a bug and a defect aren't the same thing in the world of this company. So we could dispel that problem. But it's a great example of where a terminology introduced risk into our company. So sometimes we can actually be the risk introducers. Isn't that funny? Just because we get stuck on a term. Kind of one of my pet peeves is the term happy path. I don't like that term at all because it only leads to sad path. And anybody who's done any sort of testing realizes most defects happen at neither of those extremes. They happen in between in what we would probably call boundary testing. But often folks don't refer to melancholy testing or, melancholy path. And so the terms themselves can actually introduce risk because often they're metaphors for the way we try to illustrate or communicate the concept of how we're testing. So believe it or not, even a simple word like happy can introduce risk because the only other connotation generally is sad. It's just the way we're wired as people. And it's a good reason why I tend to really train folks to use positive and negative and boundary tests. But that's just an example of how this can become a problem. So there's incredible opportunities as a pioneer in this space of quality. There's an opportunity to prosper. There's an opportunity to fail at it. There's a great opportunity to lead others. And there's an opportunity to follow leaders in it as well. And you kind of are going to be at this crossroads somewhere in your quality engineering work where you're going to have to decide, look, am I just showing up every day to get a check and at that point I'm done? Or do I want to pioneer in this space? Do I want to lead it and turn it into something that can mature as a trade, as a craft that we can pursue, as I often refer to it as the craft of quality, right? When you're a pioneer, if you think about some of the amazing pioneers in history, I'm a huge Leonardo da Vinci fan. I find him a very fascinating historical figure. And you know that there were endless things he probably tried that didn't work as well. I also am a big fan of Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb. And they say he tried almost 1,000 things before he found a filament that wouldn't burn out very, very quickly. So part of being a pioneer is being willing to fail. It's actually something you can embrace in the work of quality engineering, that you begin to approach a new technique and you'd say, I need to give some grace here that what I'm trying may not succeed. And that's actually a success if you can consider it from that perspective, because you learn from the failures, right? In a way, I'm teaching you something you probably would have heard from your parents or a teacher in school, but that's okay. It's worth repeating that the work that we do, when we go beyond just boring, I just show up for a job today, and instead I show up because I want to pursue this as someone who knows it in excellence and does it really well. It's incredible when you get that opportunity to lead others. I'm working with a great team in Rwanda, Africa right now, and I love spending time with them. And a number of them are online right now listening, which is great. But what an incredible opportunity that you have pioneered enough things that now you get to influence another group of people who then continue to pour that into others. That's one of my favorite things is when I work with folks and then they commit to saying, we will also be faithful with the message you've poured into us to pour into others. So I mentioned this a moment ago, but I heard this post. I read the post on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn most every day, and I hear from an awful lot of you all the time, and I love that. But this post made a reference that we've reached an apex in the space of automated testing, and that there was nothing more to explore. And I knew the gentleman who posted it, and I wrote him and I said, no, I don't. I want you to not give up on the work that we're doing. Of course, there's more that we can do. And so we had a great exchange, and I hope he came away encouraged through that. But you can imagine for those folks, those amazing pioneers, those people that decided to take a journey, how they could get weary at times, and they're just like, "This is I'm not getting anywhere. I've done all this work, and I'm no different in a different place than I was a year ago, or 6 months ago, or even a decade ago." Um, that's the kind of person you need to come behind and kind of encourage to keep going. Pioneers can be hard to find, right? They have to take a risk, sometimes with their reputation, their finances, and whatever it might be to try some things. Imagine with me for a moment that you were a carpenter, okay? And you had been introduced to a brand new tool. Maybe it is a chisel or a saw or some kind of leveling device. Okay. And so it might be easy for you to say, well, look at, I can cut wood now, so that must be it. That's all I can do. Um, or maybe you get that leveling device. You say, well, now I can tell that this thing is level, so I guess that's it. Or now I can, use this hammer and this chisel, and I can make a notch in something. So I guess that's all there is for a chisel, right? Um, we can get lost in a tool and really miss the opportunities the tool provides. Uh, I get asked this question all the time. I want to get into test automation. What's the best tool out there? Well, the best tool for most everything, believe it or not, is right here, is in our brain. Because the way we think, our amazing eyes, our senses, the way we are created, allows us the ability to observe things that are out of place, that don't make contextual sense where they're at. And so that's the best tool you will always have at your disposal. Regardless of all the hype with AI, I use AI. I think it's cool. I use a Copilot and I enjoy using this, but I still believe that this tool that we have, this amazing mind that we've been given, is an incredible tool that lets us do things that are fantastic. So I don't want you to ever lose sight of that, but tools can drag us away from things. Um, but let's talk about a tool for a little bit, okay? Let's just focus on this. What if you could use a saw? All right. Remember, initially you said, well, I could saw a piece of wood, so I guess that's the end of the saw. But imagine if you could use that saw to cut a couple angles in a piece of wood, and you could fit that into a couple opposite angles, and now you get a joint and something that's very that can stand a lot of force. That one particular tool used in a certain way gives you a new ability, a new capability. What if you could accurately build something on a consistent angle, such as a drainage ditch? Imagine there was a time when somebody just kind of had to eyeball it, and then someone came up with this idea to figure out a device that would help you to determine whether something was level or not. Well, everything in the world isn't level. Some things you actually want at an angle, and a drainage ditch was a great example of it. So here they took a tool that was designed probably for one purpose, and they found a way to modify it. I would say they innovated with it. And I'm a big fan, again, like I said, of Da Vinci and studying his techniques, Edison and others. Innovators have a way of seeing the world through through a lens that allows them to see beyond the immediate capability of a tool to what could be. And this is actually what I love about test automation, and something I really try to instill in my team is just because we've learned to automate something, we haven't hit the end of the road yet. We've really just begun the journey. That the things that we learned to have as a tool, if we can kind of think outside the box and say, all right, well, now that I have this, the world opens up in a whole new way that I didn't have before. Imagine if you could notch a chair leg so it fit, perfectly into a board, in a post, and all of a sudden you're able to create a seat. So you can see how those three simple tools that I mentioned earlier can really be used in much broader ways than maybe our initial imagination takes us to. So as a quality engineer, again, I want to inspire you beyond, look, I'm just showing up and I'm running test cases one more time. Well, if you approach it from that perspective, you're going to get bored with it, right? But if you approach this opportunity to show up in your testing work today and say, look, I get an opportunity to be curious about the technology that I'm working in and how it comes together, I can assure you, you will find this a lot more interesting as well. I see one of our folks has got to go, and I hope we can catch up on LinkedIn with them. Um, so what is a test engineer really pioneering? Like, what is the goal of our work, right? I hate to tell you, it's not testing. That's not it at all. Testing is what we do to assess the quality of a product. All right, that's all it is. At the end of the day, the journey that we're on, this journey is to uncover risk. That's actually what it's about. All right, maybe we should call ourselves risk engineers, but at the end of the day, it doesn't so much matter as long as we understand that the delivery isn't that I finished all the testing. The delivery of the work that we do, the product that we deliver, is here's the insights I discovered. Michael Bolton talks a lot about this idea that we perform experiments, and I love that idea that we perform these testing experiments to derive data and metrics. And from there, we have a great product that we can deliver to our customer. And then they decide what they're going to do with that information, right? We don't make that decision. Our job is to be data gatherers. And maybe we provide insights to what we perceive and what we know from our experience. But it's unlikely that we make the final decision whether to ship code or not. We provide the best product we can, the best information, the best risk insights, and then somebody else makes that decision. So where does risk exist? So let's just kind of look through the world. If we could kind of put on a lens, a risk lens, okay? Imagine you're looking through it right now. And what you'll find is risk is just about everywhere you're at. I sit here in front of a bunch of computer screens right now. I've got a bunch of cables hooked up. There's batteries running some of it. I have risks surrounding me right now. Power could go out, a cable could fail. I could spill my bottle of water on a keyboard. Risks are endless, okay? Risk to our customers and the way they see the world is a risk to maybe their money or their privacy or their information, right? When we test something from the perspective of the customer, we look at the world through what would the customer find as risky, and how can we ensure this product, alleviates some of that risk for them. Risk to our company, right? So we've got our customer. Now let's look at from our customer. One of the things that your company values incredibly, and you'll be surprised, is not money right out of the gate, although that's important to them, but their brand and their reputation mean a lot. If you think about some brands, like if we went to a supermarket and we looked on the shelf, we might see a manufacturer of a soft drink, let's say it's Coca-Cola. Trust me, that brand is worth probably billions of dollars to them at this point in time. It's highly valuable. So from our company's perspective, certainly we are help to alleviate risk of maybe a losing finances. But their perspective, they want to know the product represents their brand really well. All right, we think of others, risk to others, might be the safety to people or their privacy, right? You could kind of go on and on and on. But the point is to help you kind of make this shift in the way you think about it. And if you look at that application from the perspective of what risk is it alleviating, what risk does it introduce, it helps you to start to know where to focus your testing, okay? When we understand the work we do is about identifying risk, communicating what we find and mitigating it, it really helps us to have some focus, all right? That's the role of quality engineering, and it can become much more interesting at that point in time. So if I could leave you with nothing more today, I would say your work isn't about testing. Testing is just what you do to derive an understanding or where risk reside. All right. So, how many of you test? I know what it's going to ask you. How many of you test web applications? Maybe you can all just throw your hand up for a second or something like that. I'd like to see if you test something on the web. Okay, there's a couple of you.
Yeah, you can use raised hand gestures for that.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Paul. All right, so a few of you out there. I would imagine most of us have tested something on the web. How many of those of you that put your hand up um, know HTML? Okay, just think about it right now. You don't need to put your hand up about that. You can put your hand back down now if you'd like. But think about this. Those of you that put your hand up, how many of you have some insight of what HTML is? All right. How many of you know what JavaScript is? Okay. How many of you know CSS, PHP, JSP, Ruby on Rails? How many of you know about a web server or SSL certificates? And let me ask you this. How many of you have built a website from scratch? All right. Now, look at most of us have had at least some exposure to testing web. And yet here's a list of, I think I list 7, 8, maybe 10 items of things that go along to make just a basic web page work. Okay. Uh, a number of years ago, I had to start getting into some API testing a web service. And while that term was really fascinating, I had no idea what it really meant. You know, look, part of being a teacher, my engineers know this, is I will be the first to tell you things I don't know as well, because I think there's great power in being vulnerable and share the things we know and what we don't know. So at that point in time in my company, I didn't know much about a web service. So I asked, can I build a web service? And they said, yeah, sure. Why don't you go ahead and do it? So I used one of my favorite techniques called time boxing. So I wouldn't go, forever on this. And I said, well, I'm going to take a couple days. I'm going to work with IT and I'm going to build a web service. And I did. It turned out it was a lot easier than I had anticipated. As soon as I did, then I got out of SOAP UI Pro, or those of you that use Postman would pull out a tool like this, and I began to hit my web service doing an API call. And I'll tell you, in that couple days of experimentation, I gained a lot more insight on how this sort of technology came together. And and so I had a lot more respect for the people that wrote backend systems. And I felt like I dispelled a lot of the mystery there that was like, oh, it's something behind this in this mysterious box. We open it up, we're like, I don't know exactly what's going on inside there, but I think I use this tool to test it. All right, so that little experience helped me to dispel something that I didn't understand, and it gave me great insight into how I would go forward as someone who needed to test it. So it's a good example, and it's the reason why I listed these web application technologies to you earlier, is to say, look, you can look at this as I've just got to run one more test case on one more website. Or maybe you'd say, what is that little PHP at the end? What is that JSP? What is that ASP? Whatever you see at the end of the URL. Or there's this thing called CSS. I know I've heard that term. I have no idea what it is. It's perfectly okay that you don't know what it is, but take the time to dig in a little bit and learn about it, right? Trust me, your manager probably would love to know that he has somebody, or she has someone on the team who's hungry enough to want to learn about these things so they can become a subject matter expert in it.
Sorry, Greg, before you
Yeah.
continue, I just want to ask, I did post in the comment, does anyone have any questions so far? And Vlad put his hand up. Vlad, do you have a question, or was that in response to the question to asking about people who have tested web technologies? Oh, it was a response. Okay, no problem. Thanks. We do have a question from Sentil.
Okay.
Just wanted to ask a question, understand how it's been looked in the companies. Question: top level leaders always say the quality is everyone's responsibility, but the reality is it's been pointed question to the tester asking how this defect bug escape from your eyes. So how do
Yeah.
you deal with that?
Senthil, that's a great question. Uh, Look, in the work that we do, we all know there is, I don't know how else to refer to it. You have to have great wisdom in the work you do and realize some things just come along with corporate culture, and but your role, you may be the one person in that room who says, look, I know there's a corporate culture and these are the things we say, but I would hope to inspire all of you to be in that place where kind of the buck stops with you when it comes to at least sharing the honest information that you find. So let's talk about this one because it comes up a lot. Um, this idea that everybody owns quality, would that make a great poster to go up on the wall? Of course it would. All right. So do I believe in that concept? Yes. I like the idea of it. Do I think it's realistic that it happens that way? Absolutely not. Okay, because and this is one of the troubles I have, to be honest, with the DevOps model, is the DevOps model kind of has this idea that we will all own everything and do, hold hands and sing songs together, I guess. I don't know, but it has this idea, very utopia sort of mindset, but somebody needs to own these different phases of building a product. You need expertise to build things. You need expertise to test things. You need expertise in the market and to design the user experience. And so it's nice to say everybody owns quality. At the end of the day, if you are the quality engineer, you ultimately own the quality. All right, the buck's got to kind of stop with somebody. So maybe your role in that team is to encourage a quality mindset with people, but you have to separate the cliches from the reality. And so I don't know if that's just your gut kind of telling you like this is a nice saying, but I don't know if I buy into it or not. But that's kind of my 2 cents on it. So, and you bring up a good point on this. You asked about and people will go, how did the defect escape? How did you miss this bug, right? Cynthia, you've been there, right? And they're like, they point at you, right? I can see you looking right now, and they're like, hey, I thought you tested this. How did you miss this bug? That usually is a good indication of somebody who doesn't understand what your role is. And the reason is you're working for someone who might task you to say, find all the bugs. And that is probably one of the first cultural things you need to change in a company is as much as you do your hardest work, defects will make it to production. Okay, now it might be an obvious one, and maybe you could look at it at the very least and say, okay, if I had to do it over again, um, maybe I would go test that different. Well, that's the nature of our work. You're going to evolve and grow into it. But so own the part that you missed if you did. But we have people at some point say, how could you have missed this defect? It almost just comes along with the life of a quality engineer. And it's a very unfortunate part. And it's oftentimes because folks that make it into the world of managing quality teams often don't have any experiences in the world of testing. And so they kind of think you can perform the magic or the miracle. By the way, Cynthia, if you haven't seen my METS methodology, it came out of this very problem. So for those of you that would be interested, check out metstesting.com. Metstesting.com. I designed this system. I was working for FedEx at the time, and I was getting things thrown over the wall, as often happens with us quality engineers. Um, and I realized like there's no way I can test everything here. And so I began to prioritize like, look at if I only have an hour, here's the critical things I'm going to test. And then, I started to add more and more. Basically, it started on a yellow tablet of paper, and I eventually moved it into Excel. But check that out. I've even got a Udemy course. It's all of 40 minutes long, and it'll teach you the introductions to METs. And it's used all over the world now. Emirates Airlines uses it, Travelocity. There are people all over the world that are using this methodology now, which is amazing. considering it started as something as a scratch pad on my desk. But a lot of people have found it complements other test planning real well. So I hope you get a chance to see that. Cynthia, I hope that answered your question. And I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn if we're not already, and we can dialogue more on it if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. This helps, and I also just wanted to see how the other world looks like, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
like
You bring up a point all of us have faced, so I appreciate you doing that. Let's see. It
Shall
looks
we
like
move
Vlad
on
has.
to Vlad's question next? Thanks
Yeah,
a lot,
let's do that.
Phil. I appreciate that. Yeah, the question is, do you think professional bodies or government regulations do you mean share or shame software quality assurance, Vlad? Shape, sorry. Yeah, do you
Ah,
think that those bodies should shape what we think of as QA?
that's a good question. Uh, I think that they will likely put more procedure and policy, and dare I say, one more meeting, because we all need that like a hole in the head. But they are likely to do what groups like this generally do, which is add probably more overhead than we need. I don't necessarily think it's awful, but my experience is when you put a group like this together, they tend to go so extreme that you almost get into the mode where you have to perform the miracle again. All right. So I think we see a lot of this governance stuff that a lot of us look at and we're like, okay, I see it, but realistically, who can really fulfill that? Right. So I don't think it's the world's worst thing, but I think some people will take this to such an extreme that it would almost be impossible for you to succeed because they can use it as they can weaponize this, and that wouldn't be very good. This probably really gets to the heart of this talk, right? Which is um, if you think about the question as Senthil just asked, um, where how did you miss this defect? Um, well, we've got a fundamental problem somewhere that has nothing to do with Synthel. We have an expectations problem there. So when you move forward in your work, look, if you're looking to kind of cover your backside, right? And so you've tried to write everything down and you've come from it from that perspective, it's likely you're going to hinder what you naturally do as a test engineer. Okay, it means you kind of got introduced a fear factor into your work. That's who's going to enjoy that for too long. I know I wouldn't want to hang around in that kind of space for too long. So I think I would prefer to see our community uh, be innovative in this space to communicate. Boy, if I could tell all of you, I'll how many of you are watching right now? If I could have you do one thing today, I would begin to ask you to communicate that the work you do isn't all solely about testing. Your testing just gets you information, but that you would start to communicate. My work is about assessing risk and sharing that with you, sharing it with the business, sharing it with the devs, whatever it might be. If you can bring that change, you will start, I believe, to see a difference in what people release you to do. Now they release you to do what you really love to do, which is find defects, find bugs, right? And understand what created them to begin with and communicate on that. That's going to really change your perspective. But if they come to you to say, look, I put in a new feature, run the regression, snooze story, right? Will you have to do it? Certainly. But they see you as someone who's just hammering on a keyboard and running through a script, right? It's like a sitcom that they've watched a dozen times before, and you're the actor of it. Let's go ahead and change the perspective and say, no, while I know this role well, I can adapt to it. I used to teach an acting group, and I'd say you're working in the space of improvisation where you're using your skills that you've decided to train on, right? You now know how a backend web server works. You now know how an API comes together. And so you now apply that to the testing and you're saying, look, in the time frame I was given, I uncovered that this API cannot handle a negative input. It doesn't like that. Wow. To me, a good quality manager is going to recognize your capability and is going to say, I need more of that. I need more of what Vlad just brought to the table. or whatever. So I want to encourage you in that space.
Just on that topic, there have been a few more comments,
Yeah.
which I think can elaborate on that. So, Dasha says that the test plans can help. I think this is more about the point about things that it came after the professional bodies standards body comment. Test plans can help, partially, ideally approved or reviewed by someone else, not just you. So, you know, that responsibility is kind of, and the consequences are shared, I presume, with higher up people.
Yeah.
Joe Perrell wrote a follow-up question to Senthil's question, where today one of the test teams in the org has had the exact same comment raised to them. I presume about how did you miss this in prod. I think lots of times there is an expectation that us, as testers, can cover things that have not been asked. So a BA may give one requirement, the dev will code up that requirement, but if the tester can't cover everything, then it's still on us.
Yeah.
So I presume that the comment means you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
You are. Look, this is why hopefully your QA manager is helping you in this, in this effort to change the expectation. As long as the expectation is you're going to find all the defects, you're going to live in this world where fingers are going to come pointing back at you because you've been asked to perform a miracle that is impossible. All right. It's not only that, it's debilitating in your work as a quality engineer. All right. I don't know about you, but I don't want to, if I had to find all the defects, I would probably start to move in a space of fear because I know that that's impossible, right? I would be surprised that anybody in this call thinks they can find all of the defects in a piece of software. If you've worked in it at any point in time, you realize you can't hit every nook and cranny, every crevice of the code. And so what you begin to conclude, and again, coming back to the METS concept, is you only are given so much time. So put a strategy in place. And if you're given an hour, you're given a week, or you're given a month, that helps you to go forward. And even if you had a year, guess what? Defects are still going to go out. So this is where the quality manager, one of the biggest favors they can do for you is set the expectation. Look, my team assesses risk and they give you back what they have found. That's why I enable them to be great at what they do. And I look for those that are hungry to learn and do it in excellence. So I even have some specialists on my team. But will defects squeak by? Absolutely. So enable, I would say if I was in the shoes of the QA manager, I say, so enable my team so they get as much time as they can to exercise the code and uncover the risk so they can get that information back to you. That way you don't become the scapegoat. All right. Part of our work is you have to develop thick skin a little bit. I wish it wasn't like that, guys, but it comes with the turf. Nobody likes that kind of accusation. And it can paralyze testers into feeling like they've got to kind of cover their tail end. So they write 50-page test plans and they just go crazy with all these things that they can go back to. They almost need a lawyer on the team just so that nobody can point a finger back. If you're in an environment like that, it's, I feel for you. It's hard. Maybe that's not the healthiest environment. A lot of folks in our field really struggle with stress and fear because these expectations are there. That's not the way you need to live. And so, kind of get into the soft skills, the soft part of what we do. You can find other places that might have a healthier culture than that, but this exists. It's real. So I appreciate you sharing it, and I wish it wasn't the case. But it kind of comes with the turf a little bit. And so let's try to change that. Again, get that message out about ISS risk, right? And I use testing to help me identify that. I think that that's a step in the right direction.
I think I just want to make a comment on that. Then we'll go back to your first of all, I just want to say something that Dasha said. You can shield your good work with the test plan. If a bug was found, we'll just improve the test plan. I agree with that. I think that I just want to make a comment as well that I think one of the things about I've been a test manager on and off for I don't know since like 2011 I think. Most of the, and I think part of the and often working with say young grads or very junior testers. And they do have this fear about making mistakes, or sorry, what they think is making a mistake, when in reality they just missed something that we all could have missed. And it does paralyze them a bit. So I think one of the best thing to do as a test manager, and it can be one of the hardest things to do, but it's why we get paid more, to be honest, is to turn around and say, If somebody complains to you about your testing, says you missed something, send them to me.
I love that. Yep,
There's
that's great.
there's a reason why you're the boss and they're the junior testers. Your job is to protect your testers from the demands of people who don't really know, don't know what we do, or they get angry at you, so your testers can do their job. I don't know if that, and I think I don't know, and that's my kind of view on it. Luckily, I work in a place now where that isn't a problem. It has been in the past, especially when I worked in large sort of like banks and corporate outfits.
Yeah.
Do you want to continue? There aren't any questions at the moment. Do you want to continue with the rest with your talk?
Yeah, I'd like to continue. Let me know if this one's we need to cut things off here, but I've definitely got some other comments.
It's fine
to
for the
share.
moment. It's fine. Carry on.
Good. And let's talk about test plans for just 1 second, because it's come up. I actually look at the METS concept as a type of test plan. What is a test plan? All right. It's one of those mysterious things. It's almost like the word regression sometimes seems a mystery. Some folks look at the word regression to mean test everything, right? But that's not what it means actually at all. And a test plan, look, at the end of the day, a test plan is nothing more than a strategy, okay? It says, look, I've put some time in. By the way, that article I told you about earlier, the one on the quality veneer, I talk about what it was like to work with a tester who didn't do test planning. They just ad hoc everything. It was travesty for sure. But a test plan is nothing more than you said you took some time and you considered what is my strategy to test this, okay? Don't allow this to always turn into a 50-page Word doc. Most people hate creating that kind of stuff. Right? A test plan can literally be, I decided I'd spend 4 hours today because I know I've got this big project that's going to go on for the next 6 months. And I've assessed it for the type of technology it's built on. What's the best way for me to test it? Here's my strategy. Here's my plan. And then you follow through with that. That's what it is. So don't let that overwhelm you, because I see this happen a lot with test engineers. They're told to create a test plan, and next thing they go off and they write their thesis. They create this gigantic thing that a lawyer has to approve, and it has to go through way too much work, and it's mostly because they're developing it in fear, or they just don't know better. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. Yeah, so it's good. Someone, Dasha, test plan is a strategy. 100%. That's right. That is your strategy. Like, if we were going out on battle, this would be our battle plan. All right, think of it like that. My battle is, I gotta go test this piece of software. I gotta have strategy. So I'm fully on board with that. All right, let me look back. I want to make sure I cover some things that I don't want to forget. Let's see. So yeah, you can't thoroughly test everything, right? That's just part of the reality. And black box testing is okay, but you can only get so far with it. But understanding things behind the scenes, the technology stack and whatever is going to help give you more insight. So whatever that looks like. Look, if you're working in mobile, I've had the great opportunity of developing some mobile apps for iOS. That gave me a new insight to what's going on behind the scenes of a mobile app, right? Look, some of these things seem scarier than they are, but trust me, if your leader sees you take an interest in learning how to code in Swift, let's say, or I'm learning Java right now, I'm teaching my team Java, I think they're going to really love that. They're going to want to support you in that endeavor, because you've dove in deeper than just someone who writes test cases all day and runs test cases. You're trying to get an expertise into it. You're removing the boring part and saying, let's make this interesting. Let me learn more. All right, let's see. I'm just looking through some notes here.
Yeah, carry on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment by Sebastian. He said, it seems to me the METS concept aligns with triple constraints project management. I'm not familiar with those, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not either. I mean, I think I've heard that term, but I would be lying to say I understood it. Okay, METS is really, all it's meant to do is bring prioritization to what you test. At the end of the day, you bring categories to the type of application. So you say it's got authentication, it's got a cart, it's got a catalog, it's got a checkout, something to that effect. You break your application up into these categories, and then you'd say, well, for authentication, I'm going to make sure my critical is I can log in, I can create an account. these couple things, all the way down to reset my password, which might be, a high level or whatever, down to maybe the language that's on the page. So METS is meant to be very simple, and it complements other testing methodologies really, really well. And it's meant to evolve with time. So you don't sit down and create a METS in one shot. Usually when teams do that, it doesn't seem to hang in there that well. It's better and it evolve over time. So again, if you want to give METS a try, you can check out the site. I've got sample stuff out there, and I'd be happy to go over more with you and your team if you'd find it useful. Getting back to the interesting work, here's what I want to leave you with some beyond boring, kind of our title again, beyond boring test engineering, is choose an area of interest and then become a subject matter expert in it. Right? I encourage my team all the time, if they could share, they'd say, yeah, Greg does this. I encourage them to find an area they really love and begin to dive in on it, become we call it a SME sometimes, a subject matter expert. All right. It could be the area of web, API, performance, mobile, security, whatever it is. The breadth and width of this is quite large. All right. You don't have to be an expert in it all. Find that thing that you really love to do and dive in on that area of expertise. You probably will find it's going to lead you down other areas as well. All right. Each of these areas have potential for expertise. So find the thing you really love, that you enjoy, and own it. And then, of course, I would encourage you to share with your manager the effort you're putting into it. And by the way, this work that you're doing, it should happen on the clock. All right. It shouldn't just be 100%, but leaders love to know they have some self-learners. They love that. Okay. But you have got to own your own growth. Okay. If you are under the expectation that it's your company's responsibility to train you, you're only going to go so far with that. All right. So while you're learning this stuff, you've also got to kind of put your own skin in the game and carve out some time that can come at the cost of some family time. And I never would want to take you away from your family, but maybe you find a creative time to do it in the morning before you get up for the office or whatever it might be. Okay. So I want to encourage you in a couple other things here. Be faithful in your day job. Now, maybe that sounds a little old-fashioned, but be faithful in your day job. Do the work you were assigned to do. Okay. I worked with an automation engineer one time. It was the most distracted individual I've ever worked for. While we hired him to do automation, at any given time, I could find him doing any other thing. And it was very hard on the team, and because we could not make progress with the role we hired this person for. So the thing that you were hired to do, knock it out of the park. Like, do it in excellence, okay? And then find the other things to do. Don't allow these to be the distractions you get lost in. So do your day job well, okay? Have the wisdom to spot technology fads, all right, is a great value. And I learned something at the Pacific Northwest Conference last year. I had never heard this term, hype curve, HYPE curve. All right, look it up if you've never heard this term. I think it's Gartner that puts this graph out. It's incredible. It's a classic N curve, right? So it looks like it goes up like this, and then it's like a roller coaster. It comes down the other side. It's so sharp at the top. Guess what's up here right now in the hype curve? Has two letters in it. AI. It's in the hype curve right now. Why is that important for you to know? Because every tool on the planet for testing is trying to bolt on AI to it right now. It's in the hype curve. Now, it doesn't mean it's not useful and it won't become, but when things are in the hype curve, everybody is talking about it and they're going nuts over it and they're dropping all the other things usually. All right, guess what else has been in the hype curve over the last, let's say, 5 years? Electric cars. Now, electric cars are down here. People are starting to recognize the utopia that they thought was going to come from that had some reality to it. What do you do with all the batteries? Like, how do you charge that stuff, right? The reality of what it's really like for a whole culture to adopt electric cars. We knew it couldn't be like save the day kind of thing. There had to be some reality to it. Okay, someone's got a picture of it. Paul's put a picture out there. All right. This thing is fascinating to look at. Okay. Some other things, visual automated testing. It's gone now. This was in the hype curve a few years ago. Now people have come to the reality like it took more work than it was worth. Self-healing automation. Now, I hope some of you might be selling these tools. To me, that's total hype. And you've got to have the discernment to know what is the hype and what is the reality. Is so important as a technologist. This isn't even a QA thing anymore, guys. As a technologist, you have to have the discernment to recognize when something is in the hype and when it's a reality, okay? So if you think about automation, people are abandoning all kinds of tools now to go to Playwright, okay? I can assure you there will be another tool in 6 months or a year from now that they will abandon Playwright to go to, all right? Can Playwright do a great job? It can. Can Selenium do a great job? Yes, it can. Can Quick Test Pro do a great job? Yes, it can. These are tools, all right? These are tools. These are not the solution to the problem. They are just a tool. It's like that saw or that chisel we talked about earlier, or that level. All right. When I'm working with a team and I see them bouncing from tool to tool to tool, I know I'm probably dealing with a lack of maturity in their engineering skills. They've got enamored by the tool. All right. Our team exclusively uses Selenium. I brought over techniques I learned using Quick Test Pro. And I have no reason to switch yet because our automation runs incredibly fast. It's extremely reliable. And that's why I get a great opportunity to train the engineers I get to work with so I can teach them these techniques. It didn't require a new tool to fulfill that because we applied good principles and techniques. All right. So foundationally, if you think about kind of the latest hammer that comes out, well, hammers have been around for a long time. I have a bunch of them in my garage right now that perform different tasks, but the basics of what they fulfill is still pretty much the same. Okay. So think about that when you get lost in the latest, greatest tool that, be aware that you might be following a trend that's going to take you away from a bunch of foundation you've already laid. I can assure you in the automation space, I would consider myself very versed in this. I've been literally writing automation code for 40 years, and I have yet to see anything new under the sun. And that includes Cypress, and that includes, Playwright and Selenium and QTP. You can actually make all of those tools run equally as good if you apply the right techniques. That some of you, I know that you're not going to love to hear that, but it's important that you recognize it's a technique. It's not necessarily the tool. So be aware with the hype of these sort of things, they can be very expensive to your company, okay? I'm almost ready to wrap up here, but I want to encourage you with this. Be focused with intentionality. Do your day job, knock it out of the park, carve out your time for your growth. Like this is the things you're going to want to write down, all right, and maybe apply. Knock out your day job, carve out time for your growth, right? Use a technique I call time boxing if you haven't heard this. Right? Tell your boss, look, I'm going to spend 2 hours a week. I'm going to be reading on this technology that I want to learn, and I'm going to do it on the clock. And then also say, by the way, I'm studying this at home, but I want to use this time in the office to learn as well. They're going to love that. Provide discipline to dive into your area of interest, the thing you really love, right? Talk with your spouse about it and say, hey, look, there's this new technology. There's this new thing called Copilot. And I want to learn about it. So I'm gonna study about it a little bit, or whatever it might be. Share your learnings with your manager and your teammates and online on LinkedIn. I love to do this. So any of you that follow me know I'm always sharing some little tidbit I've learned along the way. Probably one of my favorites is stay teachable, right? You don't want to become like the computer guy that is Mr. Know-it-all. Nobody likes to work with that person. Stay teachable, stay humble, right? When you miss something, share it, right? Earlier, are we gonna find all the defects all the time? Nope, you're not. So one of my favorite test engineers I work with, when he would run into a problem, I'd say, well, what did you learn from that? Now share it with the team. To be honest, that made the leadership really uncomfortable. But you know what it did? It modeled to the rest of the test engineers that here we had someone that was teachable, and he began to get a whole following of people who wanted to learn from him. So leaders don't always like to be, seen in that kind of light, but I should say managers, but leaders do. Leaders recognize there's power and vulnerability. And, people can smell a mile away, self-promotion and pride. It puts people off, and you lose your influence, you lose your credibility. So if you want your, humility is an interesting thing. It has to have genuineness to it, right? If you get up there and brag about it, people can see it a mile away. They're like, you're just trying to kind of self-promote yourself. So find a way to be humble, stay teachable, right? You're going to find these are going to be life skills in your work as a quality engineer. They're going to make a difference. I can assure you. There's nothing worse than, being in a place where you've said it has to be like this, and then somewhere in the middle of the night you wake up and you're like, uh-oh, I was wrong. It didn't have to be like that. Be in a place where you say, at the moment, I believe this is the right thing, but I'm willing to be open. It's like, show me why it's different, why I have a different perspective. I found that to be really helpful. So here's my takeaways, and then we're going to open up for any Q&A you guys have left. Focus on a single topic to study, right? Make sure you put a couple hours on your calendar for growth. Decide where you're going to pick things up next. So maybe you finished up your time box and you say, okay, my next little nugget I'm going to learn is this. I do that every day when I work on my code. I'm building out a brand new framework in Java that is killing it. I love it. And I love sharing it with my team. Write it down, have a notebook. That same test engineer that I was telling you about earlier, when we mentored probably for 4 years or so. And one of the things that I shared with him is I'm like, have a notebook, like have something with you. Okay, I have this I found this little book that I can, I think it's called Rocketbook. But not only can I put my pages in here, but I can erase them later on. So I take snapshots of things, and that's worked really good. But don't just sit there and try to memorize it all. Show that you have an interest. Take ownership. Find a mentor and a SME. I just connected with a lady in Chicago. She wanted some extra help. I'm like, hey, I'll grab a call with you. Let's chat an hour. So if you want to learn something, reach out. Find somebody who can help you. Communicate what you're learning and exploring, and find a place. Find ways you can be inspired. Maybe it's through a meetup like this, right? Maybe you follow somebody's blog. Maybe you find craft testing and you check it out, or one of my articles. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with that. I hope you were encouraged. That's my goal, is to help encourage you to think differently on this. And I'm open for any other question and answers you all might have. And this has been awesome, Paul. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you. That was a great talk. I really appreciate it. And I've written actually a list of takeaways. The main that I did it before you wrapped up yours. I hope that I've covered the same things. In the chat that people can sort of cut and paste and use.
Yeah,
There have been some questions, a few, or at least some comments. Sorry, first of all, Dasha says thank you for sharing.
of course.
Chloe says what you said helps a lot in our personal and professional lives. Sarab has asked, are there any resources or courses for learning mobile test automation using Espresso and XCUI tests?
Let's see. Any resources, courses for learning mobile test automation? I don't have any courses for that personally. I would tell you this, though, just kind of reading between the lines of this. What's going to help you probably learn how to become a great mobile tester is learn how to write a mobile app. I'm probably going to turn it the other way around and say, maybe you download Xcode or Apple's or Android Studio, something like that, and you dive in a little bit and learn a little bit on that. So I would say this: when you find a tool and you want to learn the process, I would err on the side of finding someone who's teaching you a philosophy of testing using a tool over just using a tool. And I think that's a good win.
Thanks. That's great. Amazing stuff. Are there any other questions that you can also mute yourself if you wish and ask them that you'd like to ask Greg while he's still here? Sebastian said, thanks. I need to leave. Thanks so much, Greg.
Of
thank you
course.
for attending Subbuses as well. I've got a few questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
First of all, there are just a couple of things. There has been we talk about the languages and terms in the industry about finding bugs and positives. You mentioned at the start of your talk about how languages should be standardized. That has in itself, however, I mean, we've had efforts to do that with say the ISTQB and other ways of other organizations and people who tried to standardize language, and yet we
Yeah.
still talk at a lot of problems in testing is that we still can't define what we mean when we discuss things. But I did a talk. In fact, I did a blog on this about applying postmodernism to it and talking about applying Derrida's concepts to it, particularly regarding things like testing versus checking, that sort of thing, which are kind of antonyms. So, do you think are you still optimistic that we will end up having a shared language? Do you think that's still possible in testing, or are you still
I do. It's interesting you bring the testing versus checking. I think I know where that comes from.
Sorry.
I think if there's reasonable terms, don't reinvent the terms. So that's one of the things when I hear that testing versus checking, sometimes I wonder about the foundations of that decision. I think I'm hopeful, but let's assume that you work for a group and they call testing checking. Then at least the quality manager, I mean, Paul, if you were leading that group, you probably would say, well, here's what we call the work we do. We call it checking, and we produce these results. So if you are in that role of quality manager, at least standardize some terminology with your team. Now, I think the risk that I saw with the bug versus defect was this is a pretty common, like I think a bug is slang for defect. To me, at the end of the day, a defect is a defect. You either have it in production or it's not in production. Whereas that company decided, well, I can't even remember what it is now. A bug is when it goes to prod, and a defect is when it's not. And I'm like, that's confusing. And the moment we hire another quality engineer, they're going to not know that term. So that's not a standardized way of using it. So I think we introduce risk when we decide to reinvent terms like that. So it's one of my bigger concerns when I think in the quality space there are some divisions like this, which is, well, this is what we call it, so it's got to be the best. That's actually hurt our community, I think, overall. Find terms that seem palatable and use them. If there's a term that already exists, try to adopt them. Don't create a whole new one just so you can say, well, this is our term for it. So I'm hopeful for it, but I think at the very least, a team and the quality manager should try to standardize so that at least their team's talking apples to apples.
Understood. Thanks so much. I think also talking about the standardization aspects, and you mentioned, and there was a question as well about the effect, organizations to try and shape what we call QA. I remember back in the past, I mean, I'm sure you remember this, Greg, as well. This was a big top topic around 2013, 2014, when ISO IE 29119 came out.
Mm.
And there was a massive uproar and I mean, people called it the testing wars, online. It was, there was a massive outcry against it.
Yeah.
And people said they're absolutely going to refuse to work for companies who implement this, or, this is just imposition or rent seeking, etc. And this was a massive controversy in testing at the time. It got quite ugly, actually. I'm just wondering, do you think that, is there something within testers themselves that make us resistant to standardization? Is that a good or a bad thing?
That's a really good insight, Paul. I guess I kind of would hope there is a little bit of resistance to it because I think that you want that quality engineer to be able to question things, right? Actually, that's one of the gifts they come to the table with is when it said, well, this is always the way they do it. I've actually found most really good test engineers have kind of a problem with that. They want us to say, well, what happens if it's used this way? And that's how they find the good bugs. So maybe we are naturally wired a little bit like that. I hadn't really considered that, but that's a good insight for sure. But I also think to do our job well, we have to bring wisdom to the table. And the longer we've been doing this work, the more we realize, like, I've seen this kind of issue before, so I'm going to approach it like this. And lo and behold, that's how we find a defect. There's one technique like that. I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but it's when a dev introduces a certain design concept, and that has a problem with its methodology, and it shows up over and over. Oh, I know, it's called a defect cluster. And when a defect cluster comes up, it's because the dev used the same exact approach over and over in the app. And so, if you find that they have, let's say, validation issues with a certain form input that you find in one place, there's a pretty good chance you're going to find it somewhere else. So I think that's a good example of where they think a little different and they bring wisdom to the table.
Okay, thank you. That's awesome. Are there any? Let me ask if there are any other questions that people would like to that people have. First of all, a message from Venus. She's had to drop off, but she said, "Thank you, Greg and Paul." She doesn't have to thank me, but thank you, Greg. Learned a lot from this session.
Good.
Is there anybody who wants to unmute themselves and ask a question? Or have a point to make? Okay. I'll just ask a few more. I'll just ask one or two more questions, and that'll and then we'll wrap it up then. I'm just sorry. I wrote notes based on what you said, so I'm just going through and asking, going through my notes and finding the next thing. Oh yeah, the idea of a personal, we all take of us taking time to learn new skills, and you mentioned that we should allocate time to learn new skills, and we should talk to our managers, etc. And that's true, and we should do, and that's everybody in tech has to do that. Also find those things that really interest us in this job, or else it gets very tedious. But I think one of the things I have noticed is that two things. First of all, we're expected to kind of, as time has gone on, and devs have this worse than we do. We're expected to kind of know every technology. So if you look at job ads, for instance, and they'll put in a huge list of technologies that some of them are only tangentially related to what we do. I'll give you another example as well. I went for a job interview a couple of years ago when I was made redundant, and this was for a tester role. This was at one of the big online sort of marketplaces. And the technical task that they gave me was nothing to do with testing. It was about writing an online shop in React.
Oh, yep.
So they were testing me on my React CSS stroke JavaScript framework skills over my actual knowledge of testing. And so have you seen, first of all, we're seeing more and more of this. How can we counteract this as an industry, and what do we do about it, say, if we are looking for work?
Yeah, that's tough. To be honest, last year I was out of work most of the year. It was one of the toughest job hunts I've ever had. And I saw the same thing, Paul. I saw some of the most ridiculous requirements that I didn't know how someone would fulfill them. I'm really not sure what the recruiter's thinking putting some of that stuff out. Wait, how can we influence it though? That's a good question. Let's face it, when you're out of work and you're looking for that role, man, you're trying to kind of find the right in. I would say I actually disqualified some companies I applied for just because their role was indicated to me they didn't have a really good idea of what they were looking for, and they kind of just went for this gigantic list of things. I worked with a recruiter here in Nashville who was very helpful in giving me some coaching. And so that really made a difference. But I really am not sure how I would change that, because I've seen it with good companies and not so great companies as well. I actually interviewed with one company, and it was almost the opposite. They had this big list, but when we actually did the interview, I found that they actually didn't know a whole lot about testing. And I could tell they were wanting me to say some kind of word. And finally they said, it's a shape. And I said, are you talking about the testing pyramid? They're like, there you go. You know,
Right. Yeah.
they checked it off the list, and I'm like, well, I hope even your most basic person you're interviewing knows that term. We just dug into things that were, 10 times that complex, that seemed to mean nothing, but they were looking at it from that perspective of, and so I actually realized that wasn't going to be a very good company because the leaders didn't have a good understanding of quality engineering. So it didn't pan out anyway, but it was kind of a showstopper for me. I think, this maybe gets back to the talk, which is we've got to show up with more than I'm just a tester. It may take us decades to change this, but I think we have shown, and HR and our recruiters oftentimes just are looking for a warm body that can read and perform, test steps. That hasn't really done us any good as a community. There's so much more good test engineers offer to the role.
Thank you. And that's some great points there. I just want to just go through some of the most recent comments. Senthil said, had a great time and nice to be part of it. Looking forward to get connected on LinkedIn. Thanks, Greg, for your time and sharing your experience. Thanks, Paul, for arranging the session. Thank you very much, Senthil. Mayada, said, one of the most useful sessions I've attended in the last period. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Okay. Kavita Kanchi has written, nice to be part of this session. Thanks, Greg, for the great session. And thanks, Paul, for arranging this meetup. Looking forward to upcoming meetups. Thank you, Kavita, and you are most welcome. Chloe has written, thank you for sharing your experience, Greg. Your insights are truly valuable, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn from you. Thank you, Chloe. Some great
Chloe.
stuff. And Blandine has written, thank you for the enlightening talk. It was truly inspiring. Jithin, who is actually, I should remind, is doing the next talk, and which on the 7th of March, and we're all looking forward to that one, said, thank you for the session, Paul and Greg.
Love it.